Happy Monday, and welcome back to the Lorden Arts channel. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here today. Case Cracked is the show where we look into a mystery and what are the critical pieces that help solve that mystery. Today's case is the story of Precious Jane Doe. It was August 14th, 1977, a hot summer day in Everett, Washington, and a group of blackberry pickers found much more than they bargained for. On a small patch of ground, they discovered the body of a young woman lying dead face down. At her autopsy, the coroner noted that a visual identification could not be made, nor could fingerprinting be conducted, as the remains had sat in the heat for 5 days before being discovered. Ligature marks showed that she had been strangled, but that wasn't the cause of death. Someone had shot her several times in the head with a .22 caliber firearm, the make and model of which was unknown since there were no shell casings found with the remains. She was found with very little, no purse or identification. The young woman wore a pastel tank top with blue, green, and pink stripes and denim cutoffs. In the pockets were 17 cents, an open pack of Marlboro cigarettes, and an empty plastic bag. Her shoes were a boy's size 7, and she had a Timex watch on her left wrist. Her age was placed from 25 to 35 years old. She stood at 5 foot 10 inches tall and weighed about 155 pounds. Her hair was light brown, but skin tone and eye color could no longer be determined. This poor woman was now the county's newest Jane Doe. Investigators spent the next few months poring through missing persons reports to try to find a match. A description was released and posters were distributed. The best lead investigators could find came about by accident, just days after her body was found. In the nearby city of Gold Bar, a man was seen waving a rifle around in a park just outside of town. As officers drove to the scene, they saw a Chevy Nova pulling away, weaving through traffic. Once they pulled it over, they noticed that the interior smelled of marijuana, and when the car was searched, officers found bags of it along with roach clips, a bundle of peacock feathers, and a loaded .22 caliber rifle. They quickly arrested the man, named David Roth, and booked him. When Everett police found out about the stop and the .22, they called to see if they could question the man. Unfortunately, Roth had already been released from jail. Within a year, a man named Robert Hendershot called police with a shocking claim. He stated his friend, David Roth, had confided in him that he had killed a female hitchhiker in Everett the year before. Quote, "They deserved it," Hendershot claimed Roth had told him. Months later, on January 18th of 1979, Roth was arrested at his Port Orchard apartment on a warrant for possession of a controlled substance. Officers found pills, paraphernalia, and more peacock feathers. Officers also found the Chevy Nova he had been driving previously. Fingerprints were taken from the vehicle, and a single long brown hair was found mixed in with 2 bungee cords found in the Chevy's trunk. Bullets found in Roth's possession matched the type taken from Jane Doe's body. The Snohomish County Police were then called and allowed to conduct their own questioning about Jane Doe, and surprisingly, Roth confessed to the murder. At trial, the ugly truth of that night finally came out. On August 9th, after driving to his mother's house on Silver Lake, Roth saw an attractive young woman hitchhiking nearby and decided to pick her up. The girl said she was on her way home to a trailer just south of the lake that she shared with 2 men. When he asked if she wanted a beer, she said yes. From there, 20-year-old Roth bought a pack of Bud Light and took her to a wooded area just north of his old high school. A couple of beers later, he came on to the woman, who denied his advances. This made Roth very angry. He walked to his car and retrieved a handful of peacock feathers that he took to the woman and offered to her as a gift. When her attention was on the feathers, he used one of the bungee cords he had also grabbed from his car and wrapped it around her neck. When that cord broke, he used a second one. As he dragged her body into some nearby brush, she began to convulse. Scared that she would survive, he took the .22 from his car and shot her. He didn't know the girl's name. Hitchhikers, he claimed, didn't discuss things like that. He couldn't even tell them what color her eyes were. On November 9th, 1979, Roth was convicted of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison. Jane Doe received justice, but still didn't have her own name. 3 decades later, in 2008, a detective named Jim Scharf had taken over the case. Quote, "This young girl was precious to me," Scharf said. "I knew she had to be precious to her family too, so I had to find them. We needed to give her name back to her and return her remains to her family." He now called her Snohomish County's precious Jane Doe. Nothing detectives had tried turned up anything. They were unable to get DNA from the single hair found because it contained no root to test. Several other methods to extract DNA had failed. Scharf decided to once again question David Roth. In 2005, Roth had been granted parole and released from prison, and in another surprising turn, now wanted to help the investigation. He said, quote, "I can no longer help her, but I can help those who are looking for her. Some things we have to do." He would not discuss her death, but did help refine sketches of Precious. In the years that followed, a website was established to help find her identity, new composite sketches were drawn up, and the University of North Texas took a crack at extracting DNA from her remains again. They were successful in sequencing a partial sample. From there, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was able to identify 3 potential matches. They also determined that the original age given for Precious was wrong. Instead of 25 to 35 years old, she was actually very likely only 16 to 19 years old. These revelations led to more possibilities, but those would also eventually be ruled out. With the rise of genetic genealogy research, Scharf was offered another chance, but they needed a full DNA sequence to compare with genealogy websites, and so far, no one had been able to extract one. That was until they found that single strand of hair that had sat in evidence all these years. Everyone had considered it unusable due to the fact that the hair without the root attached contained no nuclear DNA, which is required for a full sequence. In 2018, Dr. Ed Green, a paleogenomics researcher at UC Santa Cruz, took over. During the next 2 years, he developed a technique that allowed him to extract a complete DNA profile from hair without the root. With the help of Golden State serial killer investigator Barbara Ray Venter and a team of pro bono genealogists, in June of 2020, Precious Jane Doe was finally given her names back. Elizabeth Elder was born on November 3rd, 1959, in Hood River, Oregon, to a couple who divorced soon after. She was put up for adoption and adopted by the Roberts family, where she grew up as Lisa Ann Roberts. When she was 6 years old, the family moved across the state to Roseburg. In the summer of 1977, things took a rough turn when her parents found a bag of marijuana on the front lawn and confronted her, which started an argument. On July 25th, she failed to return home after spending the day with friends. She left no note and took almost nothing with her. That night, her adoptive father reported her missing. Although her name was initially entered into NCIC, the National Crime Information Center, because she was about to turn 18, someone made the decision to take her name off the list. A few weeks later, Lisa called from Everett, Washington, 400 miles from home, and asked her parents to send her money. They agreed, but pleaded with her to come home, to which she replied she would think about it. No one ever picked up the money. When Lisa was killed, she had been gone only 16 days. Quote, "I've always wondered how to alleviate someone's sorrow. I don't know what you can actually say to someone who you've killed their loved one," Roth said. "I think I would try to convince them that I'm no longer the person that did that, and I've learned to value life." He would never get a chance to have that conversation. David Roth died of cancer exactly 38 years after her murder on August 9th, 2015, and several years before her identity was found. Her family is happy to have the answers, but heartbroken to know what happened to her. They plan on holding a service for Lisa in Hood River, Oregon. Lisa's case was one of the first solved by extracting DNA from rootless hair, and then finding her identity using forensic genealogy, a method that I'm sure will help other families in similar situations find the answers that they're also desperately looking for. Case cracked. I would like to thank Snohomish County WA.gov, The Atlantic, HeraldNet, Como News, King5.com, KEZI.com, and GenomeBC.ca. Of course, the biggest thank you goes to Christy Arnhart for researching and writing up today's case, and here she is to discuss it with us now. Okay, so I now have your sound turned on, Christy, so we can talk about this. Starting with, when I was first looking at this, the mentions of the peacock feathers really grabbed my attention. And I was thinking like, oh, this case is going to be cracked by, they're going to do some DNA testing on a peacock feather and trace it back to a particular bird or something. Not quite what happened. Yeah, not quite what happened here. But what is it with the peacock feathers? Or do you have any thoughts on why he was carrying these around?
I have no idea, other than maybe he just liked them.
Yeah.
I mean, I love peacocks and peacock feathers. So I've got decorations, pictures all over my house. But it is odd that he had all those whole feathers.
Yeah. I mean, I do recall in terms of fashion trends that feathers were kind of a thing. I don't recall them being peacock feathers. I think like back in the early 80s, you might see on someone's wall where maybe they had a few feathers up and things like that. I remember like in earrings you would have, but like smaller birds' feathers, or just in someone's hair, they might have some feathers. But yeah,
unless you get someone extravagant like me, and I have the tips of peacock feathers set into earrings, but they made headbands too.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay. Yeah. And obviously we can see your love for peacock feathers right behind you. So yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a tell in terms of where he worked or he had access to them or something like that. I did look into just like how do you collect them? And apparently peacocks do shed all of their feather, all of that part of their feathers, their train, I think it's called, once a year. So it could just be that, I don't know if he was close to a place where there was a lot of peacocks and he was picking them off the ground or what, but kind of a strange
odd.
Yeah. Strange thing that we certainly don't hear too much about nowadays. Now, on top of the tragedy we have with someone being brought into this world, family goes through a divorce. That's terrible. Then she gets put up for adoption, even worse. In 1970, we then have her biological father with his new wife and then 3 of her brothers dying in a car accident.
Yeah.
So just a lot of very traumatic things going on with this family. And Scharf, at one point, when he started working on the case, made a big request to the FBI. Can you tell us about that?
Scharf asked the FBI for a list of all missing people who could potentially be precious. Young women who were white, born from 1955 to 62, within 3 inches of her height, which was 5'10", and whose cases were removed from a federal database in the latter half of the 70s.
Wow.
He received a list with 39,447 names on it.
Whoa, that's insane.
It didn't say who had been found, who had been removed. He called it an impossible list. And to make things worse, Elizabeth was listed on the list, but he had no way to narrow it down and try and find that out.
Right. How do you cut down? Wow. It's weird because when he says that have been removed from a federal database, I wonder if that includes people that have been found, because we know in so many of these cases, people do wind up being found, and then all of a sudden that record has to get pulled out somehow. 39,000. I used to be a data guy in my previous life, and I don't know, outside of like, I guess, regionality, I would start looking at where the cases were originating from and then kind of starting on the West Coast, maybe kind of deprioritizing some of the stuff from the East Coast. But it's tough, especially when you're talking about this many years later. You're probably thinking, hey, who knows where the missing persons report could be filed? It could be filed anywhere in the country.
True.
So I get the request, but yeah, trying to go through 40,000 names and then ultimately knowing that she was in there. Wow.
I know.
According to HeraldNet.com, after all this time, a new mystery has emerged the day that Lisa Roberts called home. So that time she called home to ask for money. Her parents learned that she'd been staying with a woman in Everett. Police are actually looking to find that woman because they think that she might be able to fill in some of the gaps in this story. So if that sounds familiar to you, or you heard someone talk about something that sounds like it's connected to this, please call that in as a tip. Tips can be directed to the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office at 425-388-3845. Christy, thank you so much for your help on this today. We really appreciate you. And I've got some other people that I need to thank right now. Thank you, PayPal supporters Think Mutiny Publishing, Sandra Piet, Jennifer Wilson, and Michael Park. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit lordnarts.com. There you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, or buy merchandise. Case Cracked is frequently demonetized by YouTube, but we know learning about the mechanisms that help support and find justice in these cases is important to understand the many unsolved cases that we also cover, and we really appreciate your support in allowing us to continue doing that. Remember, you can get another Lord Narts story every week on the Seriously Mysterious podcast. A new episode is coming tomorrow and every Tuesday after that. Visit seriouslymysterious.com and remember to subscribe on your favorite podcatchers. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon if you'd like to catch one of our weekly Secret Studio live shows. And of course, I'll be back with a new unsolved mystery for you on Friday, right here on the Lord Narts channel.